Hello friends, James Stevenson back with part 21 in my Tesla earnings forecast video review series. I am joined as always by my co-host, Loki, who has curled up in bed to rest this morning. He didn't get enough sleep last night apparently. So he'll get some more rest in the Loki cam right here below me as I continue to review my Tesla earnings forecast thread that I tweeted out on May 7th. If you're wondering how far down the 69 tweet thread we are at this point, video number 21, we're halfway. So we've covered 34 tweets in 20 videos. Will it take us another 20 videos to get the rest of the way? No, it certainly will not. Because if I scroll down a little bit and give you a preview, by the time we get to tweet 40, we'll be at the top of the page, and then from there I'm going to make 5 videos that cover the rest of my detailed forecast model. I might make more after I get through all of that, but those 5 will be the last 5, and I might cover these next 5 tweets in the next 2 videos. So let's start with this one. What's this one doing? It's cost of sales percentage. And I'm not going to make you look at it this way. I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing for several videos and let you see my live Excel spreadsheet. This is where we left off with the how Tesla makes and spends each dollar of revenue page. Loki is trying to get more comfortable, I guess. Good boy. Love you. Okay, so well, let's cover this little section that I don't put in my forecast model just so I don't scroll past it and leave you wondering what's in this section. So I'm just reconciling my non-GAAP operating expenses to the GAAP operating expenses. So what do you have to do to make those changes? You have to add the stock compensation to give you non-GAAP OPEX plus all stock-based compensation. Then you have to subtract the stock-based compensation that's in the cost of sales. I'm going to blow through this real fast because it's not important. It's just a check figure section. So that gives you the operating expense including the stock-based compensation that belongs there. Then you subtract out interest income, other expense income, net, and you add back the net income / loss attributable to non-controlling interests. And that gives you the same GAAP operating expenses that you see on the income statement. So I've got one of them linked and I've got the other one calculating as the sum of these adjustments that I've made up here. So that's how you tie stuff out if you're wondering, hey, when it's possible to do math 2 different ways, it's a good idea to just do it both ways and then compare them both and see if they got you the same answer. That's what this is doing right here. Okay, next is cost of sales percent by income statement line. So what are the cost of sales percentages for each of Tesla's businesses? Which ones have high cost of sales and which ones have low cost of sales? Well, for automotive sales to cash buyers, we're looking at a 79% cost of sales. For leasing and resale revenue, it's only a 59% cost of sales, but you have to finance it yourself because the buyer isn't paying you the full price of the vehicle at time of purchase, and you're rolling the dice, taking some amount of risk that at the time they give you the vehicle back, it'll be worth selling to somebody else at about the amount that you think it ought to have as residual value or better. So sometimes people wonder, hey, if the cost of sales is so much better on leasing and resale revenue, why not just make everybody buy them on a 3-year lease? Well, a ton of people wouldn't be okay with that. They would just go buy some other car. And the other one is you would have to finance your own purchase of the raw materials and the parts that went into those vehicles and not get paid until, receiving monthly payments over a 3-year time horizon that still don't give you enough to cover the cost of that vehicle, and then you'd have to sell the leased vehicle. So you're having to carry those costs over that time period, I think any company would go bankrupt trying to borrow enough money to span that gap, especially if you're selling more and more cars every year like Tesla is. So that's why. Energy generation and storage, we had an 89% cost of sales reported by Tesla in Q1. That's up a little from Q4 when it was down to 88%. So just hanging right around that 90% level. I do have that improving. I don't have it improving to crazy numbers. I have it improving to, 80% by the end of 2023 as Megapack becomes a larger and larger fraction of the total Tesla energy business. At a better cost of sales percentage than the average product Tesla Energy sells. Then for services and other, this is about a 95% cost of sales business. It was higher than that in Q1 of 2022. 93% in Q1 was pretty good. I'm continuing that trend forward. So I do have better cost of sales percentages coming, with the worst one in Q1. Will I be shocked if Q2 is a little bit worse than this? No, not shocked, but my forecast is for 80%. So next is the Tesla cost of sales percent by site and product section. So at the same level of detail that I forecasted, what cost of sales percentages do I have? Well, here's how Model S was trending last year. Here's where I have it now. I've got the cost of sales percent higher. What's doing that? The price reductions, right? The price cuts make the cost of sales percentage higher. So we saw some increase from Q4 to Q1. I'm expecting more in Q2 with lower prices throughout the quarter than we saw part of the quarter in Q1. Tesla was charging higher prices. So that ought to stabilize toward the last half of the year, but I do have it going higher. Same story with Model X. They've had price cuts since the middle of Q1 that are going to drive that cost of sales percentage higher. What about Fremont Model 3? Same story, it's higher. What about Fremont Model Y? Same story, it's higher. So all the Fremont-made vehicles are moving up in cost of sales, which is not necessarily what you want. Next we've got Shanghai Model 3. This line was shut down some in Q1 for retooling. I'm hoping they're getting more efficient off of that, and I don't think they've cut prices more, and they should be exporting more Model 3s to Europe where prices are higher than they are in China in Q2. If you believe all that, then you believe the cost of sales percent shouldn't be as bad as it was reported in Q1, up 10 points from Q3 of 2022. I've got some retracement happening there, not all the way back to 66 or 68%, but just getting a little bit better, as I think Tesla's going to be able to achieve higher average selling prices on Shanghai-built Model 3s, or that Shanghai Model 3 costs are going to get a little bit better, or the combination of the two, right? Then Shanghai Model Ys were at 72% cost of sales in Q1, according to my model, which again is more detailed than Tesla reports. So sometimes I state it as though it's a fact that Tesla reported 72% on Shanghai Model Y. They didn't. But that's what's in my model. That's what made sense when I went through and tied out my forecast based on the delivery numbers that Troy Teslike thinks the actuals were. And for the future time periods, it's all my forecast for the volumes and the rates. All the assumptions in the forecast are me guessing at the midpoint of a range of likely outcomes and building up from a granular level to try not to miss anything big or by a lot. So what's Shanghai Model Y doing? Same kind of thing Model 3 was doing, getting a little bit better as they get more production output from that factory. Should get 12 weeks of output instead of 9 in Q2. That by itself ought to get them a little bit more economies of scale efficiency than we saw in Q1, and a little bit of improvement after that. So same kind of story there. Berlin Model Y, is this getting better over time? It ought to. It was getting better, right? So last year up over 100%, then coming down 99, 92, 93 in Q1 with some lower prices in Europe. But as the number of Model Ys produced per day increases, the costs per vehicle should come down for stuff like labor. You're paying labor by the hour, regardless how many vehicles they produce during each hour. So that's what does that over time. The more you can produce, the more efficient your operation becomes, the better your cost of sales percentages get. They come down. Ought to. Now, they're not going to get better on raw materials, right? The more raw materials you need per car, well, that's just going to continue probably. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of economies of scale you get for like bulk purchases. Maybe they'll cut you a little deal on the price or the cost that you pay to buy in raw materials or parts if you place larger orders, for example. But mostly it's the labor cost per vehicle coming down that makes the cost of sales percentage get better at higher output volume. Then Texas Model Ys ought to be getting lower and lower cost of sales percentages as they produce more and more of them. I do have this rising a little in Q2. This has to do with US Model Y price cuts that happened mid-Q1 being effective throughout the entire quarter. But then those same efficiencies we just talked about for Berlin ought to kick in for Q3 and Q4. Cybertruck costs will be crazy high this year. I've got over 200% in my model for Q3, almost 150% in Q4. What about next year? I've got Cybertruck becoming barely gross margin positive in Q3, so less than 100% cost of sales, Q3 of 2024, and then that'll continue to improve in 2025. But that's what's sitting in my model. Then for Semi, I had that starting at a crazy high number too, and still over 100% cost of sales on the semis Tesla's making in Nevada and delivering to Pepsi. And using internally, right? Those aren't even being sold. And maybe by the end of this year, they'll be down to some reasonable cost of sales percentage as the production of Semi ramps to a little bit higher volume. So that's what's sitting in my forecast, giving us total automotive cost of sales of 79% in Q1, almost 79% in Q2, then 77% in Q3, 76% in Q4, mostly owing to Berlin and Austin getting a lot better than they were. Yep. And then I also have costs of sales for the non-automotive areas of Tesla. What about solar panels? Well, there isn't much hope that solar panels are going to become very profitable. That's an intensely competitive industry. A lot of folks make and sell or import and sell solar panels, so you can't get a lot of price leverage selling just rooftop solar panels. A lot of folks make them. So I think Tesla's up around 100% cost of sales on these, and will probably stay there for a while. Solar roof, maybe a little bit better margin because you're selling a differentiated product, so you can charge a little bit more for it. Since it doesn't look like everybody else's solar panels, it looks like just roof tiles. Pretty ceramic roof tiles. And for Powerwall, we've got maybe an 87% cost of sales in Q1. That would have been a little bit higher than what I had in my forecast model last year. I have that improving rapidly as Tesla can sell more Powerwalls. Then for Megapack, I do have this improving right around 90% in both Q4 and Q1, then 85%, 80, 78, getting into this 20%, low 20% gross margin range that Zach indicated on the Q1 earnings call. And there's other, the other is very small, but it does kick out a number, so that goes here. So any other products Tesla Energy is selling that aren't listed above explicitly gets you to these total Tesla Energy cost of sales percentages. So carrying forward this long-term trend of getting a little better on cost of sales, and mostly Megapack is the contributing factor to cost of sales getting a lot better. As Lathrop continues to make more and more of them. Then services and other cost of sales. What are we doing here? This is just showing a little bit of improvement over time. Yeah. And that gets you to total cost of sales percentages down here. What's the total gross margin section doing? It's literally the cost of, it's literally 1 minus the cost of sales percentages that are above. Why is that true? Because we're talking about, okay, you sell something, you make this much money, then you subtract how much it costs you. However much is left is gross margin. So we already saw the cost of sales percentage. What's the cost as a percent of the revenue? Then this is just the other, however much is left. That's how much you have to pay your operating expenses and hopefully have some profit left over, right? So gross margins are down in 2023 versus where they were in 2022 for Model S, for Model X, for Model 3, for Model Y. All of these are down in 2023 as percentages of revenue. So down from, better than 25% to right around 20% this year, probably. Then in Shanghai, they were really making a lot of money last year with gross margins up around 35%. I've got that falling to less than 30% on average over the course of this year. Again, this is the same information we saw above, just presented differently. Berlin, getting into double-digit gross margin percentages later this year, which is where you want it. You don't want to have a single-digit gross margin. That's not enough profit to pay the bills on everything else that a corporation has for expenses. Then Cybertruck with negative gross margins. That's how it's presented when your cost of sales is more than 100%. You take 1 minus a number larger than 100% and it flips to negative. So that's that 225% cost of sales here. 1 minus 2.25 is negative 1.25 or negative 125% per 100. Right. Then Semi gets to positive gross margin by the end of this year, I hope. In my forecast, that's what I think is going to happen. Yielding total automotive gross margins, which contain regulatory credits gross margins that are really high because there's almost no cost associated with selling somebody regulatory credits. So these are better than 99% gross margin. That's a great business to be in. If you can do only this. You're not allowed to do only this, though. In order to earn regulatory credits, you have to actually sell people electric vehicles. And not everyone has figured out how to sell compelling electric vehicles into the market. Tesla has done a better job of that globally than anyone else has. Then automotive gross margin percent, excluding regulatory credits. Hey, if I throw out these regulatory credits, how much is left if you thought that business didn't exist or that it's going to go away in the future and you want to know what the number is trending towards? Well, we've got, more like 20, a little over 20% for this year probably worth of automotive gross margin, excluding regulatory credits, still among the leaders, still world-class automotive gross margins. A little over 20% is pretty great by automotive manufacturer standards. Then we get to the non-automotive area, the Tesla Energy area. You see solar panels are a toss-up if you're going to get a positive or a negative number for gross margin. Then solar roof, we're probably looking at high single-digit gross margins if I have to guess, and I do have to guess because Tesla doesn't report this. Then for power walls, those ought to get more profitable as Tesla is able to scale the production output, since they have enough cell supply. They're not cell constrained anymore on this business. They ought to be able to sell a lot more power walls and make more money doing so. Megapack I have growing from about a 10% profit margin up to a little over 20% by the end of this year, and then staying in about that range. I'll take that forecast up if Tesla beats the guidance they gave of mid 20% long term, but I'm not going to forecast a lot more than that, given what we heard Zach say about the Megapack business. And I will leave to others to speculate upon why the business isn't a lot more profitable than that. It's just nowhere near the hype and the promises we heard from Zero Sum Game and JP Sart and that group. Really just those two, right? Mainly. So that gives you total Tesla Energy gross margins increasing from 10% to 20% by the end of this year would be great if they can manage that. Services and other gross margins increasing from mid-single digits to possibly 10% by the end of the year. Then gross margin percentage overall, hopefully hanging out in the low 20s and not falling into the high teens, where it was reported in Q1. Hopefully we get right back up out of the high teens. And that's a good place to end this video before we talk about a different topic. So I'll check back in with Loki, who has effectively hidden behind his blue blanket. And I'll outro and say if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel? It's free to do that on YouTube. It's only $3 a month to do that on Twitter, where you get access to my exclusive subscriber-only tweets and my weekly series, James and Loki's Gems of the Week, where I go through all the tweets I liked on Twitter over the previous week and talk about them. Thank you to everyone who supports me through Patreon or YouTube or Twitter, especially my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Rebellionaire.com, and I'll see you in the next one.